may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, I know we titled this the top 10 lessons learned from week 13. You know what? Going to be a little bit different. I'm going to recap every game. Let me do this instead. We'll talk about my most impactful takeaways as well as what I think we may be able to expect going forward because of them. But before we get into anything, we have to give away some Fantasy Flock Network hats here. Of course, thank you so much for everybody who went down there and dropped a like, left a comment on the last video. And with all your support, we were able to pass 61,000 subscribers. So thank you so much. And of course, every time you go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, you get entered in to win a free Fantasy Flock Network hat. Our winner is going to be Nicholas and BJ Cutter. Thank y'all so much. And make sure you send me that email ASAP with your physical address so I can get that hat out to you. And of course, before we dive into this, that we have to go out and give a shout out to our sponsor in Underdog Fantasy. On Underdog Fantasy, when you go and use promo code FLOCK and make your first deposit, they'll match you dollar for dollar with that deposit. You can go check out some really cool player props. I'll show some player props that they have for Monday night. Of course, they have these every single week. They have a ton of drafts we're going to get on during the live streams as well. I'll say we lost a lot of money on Underdog Fantasy this week, to be completely honest. But nonetheless, hopefully you can do better than I can. And let's go over to our first lesson learned. We should have known this going into the week. You can't start anybody from Houston. I mean, what is there to talk about here? With the Houston Texans, they get shut out against the Indianapolis Colts. I convinced myself, Brandon Cooks, yeah, he's still a high-end wide receiver 3. He's still a low-end wide receiver 2. I mean, you could still go through and consider starting for the... No, you can't consider starting him for the flex. I mean, with Brandon Cooks, this is something that we discussed coming into the week, that you've actually seen the volume take a dip down as of late in Houston. And we've discussed this, that, I mean, if you're looking at one of these wide receivers that's playing in one of the worst offenses in the NFL, I mean, Brandon Cooks at the beginning part of the season, when he was walking away with 14 targets in a given matchup, when he had 11 targets, 13 targets, 14 targets, you're getting that kind of volume in Houston. Sure, you can come away and you can be a mid wide receiver too, but since the bye week, this has changed. Since the bye week, you've had 3, 5, and now 6 targets. And of course, a big reason for this is that the Houston Texans, they can't pick up first downs. They can't sustain drives. When you can't sustain drives, you can't run a ton of plays. So, I mean, with Brandon Cooks, you can't play him. And I mean, I even said it was okay to consider starting Rex Burkhead this week. Now, of course, I've never told anybody to ever start Rex Burkhead coming until Sunday morning. Then you had David Johnson ruled out, and then I was like, okay, well, maybe, just maybe, you can consider Rex Burkhead here. We were saying start Rex Burkhead over players like Nyheim Hines. Don't get it twisted. I wasn't saying start Rex Burkhead over Leonard Fournette. But still, I mean, thought that he was at least somewhat intriguing, knowing that he was going to get every single snap in Houston. It doesn't really matter. I mean, with Rex Burkhead, yeah, he has a pretty nice role in this offense. I mean, you look at him and he gets 8 carries compared to Royce Freeman only getting 3. He gets 2 targets, Royce Freeman getting 1. It doesn't matter. There's no production to be had in Houston. I would go through and just cross off every single player on that list. And the biggest takeaways that we could have from the Indianapolis Colts side of things, like we can say Jonathan Taylor is good. That's not going to help anybody out here. Of course, Jonathan Taylor is a damn good running back and a damn good player in fantasy. What's a little more impactful is I think that you can be really excited for what we have with Michael Pittman going forward in Indianapolis. Now, the reason for this is you're looking at Carson Wentz. He only had 158 passing yards this week, and we talked about this with Carson Wentz this week, that it wasn't a good matchup against Houston because literally word for word, we said they were giving Jonathan Taylor 30-plus carries because they were just going to be able to run all over this team and not have to worry about Houston really putting up a fight at all. That's exactly what happened. But with Carson Wentz, only 158 passing yards, Michael Pittman, 77 receiving yards. I mean, adding on 33 rushing yards in his own right, accounting for almost 50% of the passing offense here for Indianapolis. Going forward, when this team will have some tougher matchups like you're seeing over the next few weeks. I mean, the New England Patriots, the Arizona Cardinals, the Raiders, the Jags, some of those games should be a little bit closer. I think you can be excited about Michael Pittman. And now our next lesson learned, we'll be going over to the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions game. Got a couple things to talk about. Priors have been confirmed. Yes, Alexander Madison going to be the bell cow running back here in Minnesota. I mean, if you're looking at the amount of snaps that Alexander Madison played this week, he played 64 snaps compared to Keeney's 10. I mean, that was 64 out of 76 potential snaps. He saw 29 routes run out of the backfield here, as well as 22 carries. Alexander Madison is that bell cow running back you thought he was coming into the week. Now, I guess we can also say a takeaway is Justin Jefferson's going to be a league winner. I mean, with Adam Thielen, of course, he goes down at the beginning part of this game. Not something you could have expected. But now, I mean, Justin Jefferson trending in a beautiful direction here. I mean, if you're looking at Justin Jefferson dropping 35 points, now sliding his way up to being the wide receiver 4 on a points per game basis this season, 14 targets, 182 receiving yards, and 11 receiving touchdowns. I mean, remember how many people said I was an idiot for ranking him at our Dynasty wide receiver 1 spot ahead of Jamar Chase back after Jamar Chase had his 200-yard receiving week? You owe me an apology. I will say that right now. I mean, nothing to really talk about with Alexander Madison and Justin Jefferson. But one thing that we can't discuss is Jamaal Williams. This is something that we need to be changing what we had going into the week. Where Jamaal Williams, we were saying that he was an intriguing start given the fact that you were going to be seeing him come out and get 80% of his backfield touches. And if he was getting 80% of his backfield touches, he was going to be a very high floor player. Well, I mean, yeah, he was fine in terms of the points at the end of the week. I mean, 9 fantasy points. It didn't kill you, and obviously it's so damn hard to find that running back production at this point. But with Jamaal Williams, what sucked is the fact that we were wrong. He's not seeing 80% of the snaps in this backfield. I mean, you have Jamaal Williams coming out, and he had 35 snaps out of 72. So Jamaal Williams is a 50-50 running back here in Detroit. So with Jamaal Williams, I mean, knowing that the Detroit Lions, the majority of weeks, aren't going to be going out there and dropping 29 points. I think this was maybe best case scenario for Jamaal Williams. Didn't really get the role in the receiving game as well. So going forward, Jamaal Williams not nearly as intriguing as we once thought if we have DeAndre Swift missing more time. And now our next lesson learned, going over to the New York Giants and the Miami Dolphins game. I mean, I think we need to be lowering our expectations with Saquon Barkley. Now with Barkley, we've been talking about it over and over and over again, that this was going to be the worst offense in the NFL this week with the New York Giants, looking at how bad Mike Lennon would have been. Now, of course, you do have the Kenny Golladay injury affecting this just a little bit. But one thing that also stands out is the fact that with Saquon Barkley, he only played 49 snaps. You got Saquon Barkley, 11 carries out of this backfield and 9 targets. And you had Devontae Booker with 6 carries and 4 targets. So Barkley didn't have the worst day in fantasy. But I mean, if you're trying to project him going forward, I mean, with Saquon Barkley, if he's going to be losing touches to Devontae Booker of all running backs in one of the worst offenses in the NFL, like, what's the bullish case here for Saquon Barkley? Like, I thought that he was going to be fine. I thought he was going to be able to overcome this poor offense, given the role that he had as a receiving running back. Yeah, he gets 9 targets, but I mean, with Devontae Booker also getting 4, that's capping what you're getting from Saquon Barkley. I think he will be a running back falling our rest of season rankings. And speaking of running backs that are going to be falling in our rest of season rankings, y'all know someone that we've never really thought is that talented. Myles Gaskin. With Myles Gaskin, I mean, over the past month, we've been saying you play him, just because with no Malcolm Brown, Myles Gaskin was changing over to being the lead running back in this backfield, playing on all 3 downs. It's changing a little bit here. He only plays 44 out of 70 snaps in this backfield. Now, he does see 25 routes run. He gets 2 targets out of the backfield, but he has 15 carries compared to what you had with Salvon Ahmad's 8. So it looks like Salvon Ahmad is now going to be expanding his own role in Miami, which is something that we saw back in 2020. And it will be bumping down your expectations with Myles Gaskin, especially when this offense isn't going to look to throw the ball as often to him as you would get with someone like Jalen Waddle, Devontae Parker, and Mike Gesicki, all getting close to double-digit targets this week. So yeah, lower your expectations down with Myles Gaskin. And now let's go over to our next matchup. This will be the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What am I supposed to say with Tampa? I mean, go through, start every single player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Leonard Fournette coming out 44 rushing yards. Sure, that's not great, but who the hell cares? Leonard Fournette, 7 receptions, 50 receiving yards in the receiving touchdown, so I'm dropping over 20 fantasy points. Gronk gets 4 receptions, 2 receiving touchdowns, 58 receiving yards. Mike Evans almost hits 100 receiving yards. Chris Godwin, 15 receptions, 143 receiving yards. There's nothing to discuss other than you play these guys every single week. We had a question in the live stream a couple nights ago asking if you could go through and play Mike Evans and Gronk on the same team, if they could produce at the same time. Yeah, this is, twice now we've seen against the Atlanta Falcons, both Evans and Rob Gronkowski at the same time having great weeks. And now over with the Atlanta Falcons, I know some people are going to be making a big deal about the usage that you actually had for, a running back like Mike Davis. Now, Mike Davis does see more snaps than Cordell Patterson. Now, while Mike Davis does see more snaps, does it matter? It frankly doesn't. We've seen this so far all season. Cordell Patterson isn't playing a ton of snaps here. I don't think you need to be that worried because when Patterson is on the field, he's getting the ball. It's really funny that you're looking at Mike Davis. He plays 38 snaps, 4 carries. You get Cordell Patterson playing less snaps and 13 carries and more targets out of the backfield at the same time. With Cordell Patterson, he still comes out without that large of a role and with a very tough matchup at the same time. And it gives you a fine game. Now, no, it wasn't what you had last week. I don't think you should be, overreacting to what we have with Cordell Patterson here. Now, a wide receiver that I simply don't know what to do with, Russell Gage, coming out and dropping 130 receiving yards, 11 receptions, and 12 targets at the same time. Now, over the past 3 weeks here, you've almost averaged 10 targets a game for Russell Gage. It's been about 9 targets a game over the past 3 weeks. Of course, no Calvin Ridley in this offense. Maybe, just maybe, we can consider starting Russell Gage going forward. I would love to know your opinion on this. The issue is he's going to have a tough matchup this upcoming week. Let me know what y'all are thinking about Russell Gage. And our next game that we need to be recapping here will be the Philadelphia Eagles, where there was a pretty big change here. Now, I don't know if this is going to be something that we can expect to happen going forward. But, you get the Philadelphia Eagles with Gardner Minshew coming out and finally giving you some passing production, dropping 33 points. Now, a couple things happening. This was a very nice matchup against the New York Jets. So please, let's not just completely lose our mind here with Minshew Mania. Now, I will say Gardner Minshew had a strong game, and he finally unleashed our guy in Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert, 6 receptions, over 100 receiving yards, and multiple receiving touchdowns at the same time. You know how much I love our guy, Dallas Goedert, who we've been talking about for the past month. Dallas Goedert, T. Higgins. Dallas Goedert, T. Higgins. We'll get to Higgins a little bit later on in the video. Now, what we also see with Philadelphia is a running back that was on our buy low list about a month ago when he was injured. Miles Sanders comes out and gets 24 carries at 120 rushing yards. Now, as we've discussed, it was a very easy matchup against the Jets. And Miles Sanders, yet again, looking like we possibly have to be dealing with an injury here. We're going to get more updates on this. Maybe it's something we don't have to worry about. I don't want to be overreacting really with anything in Philadelphia. Outside the fact that I think when Gardner Minshew is starting, raise your expectations with Smith. You raise your expectations with Dallas Goedert, expecting there to be more passing volume in Philadelphia. You had 242 passing yards this week for Gardner Minshew. I don't necessarily think you can get that excited about Gardner Minshew himself in fantasy, but I think based on the fact that Jalen Hurts, since the first month of the season, we're going into week 14, has had one game with over 200 passing yards. I think you have to be very excited about Gardner Minshew. And in the case of the New York Jets, what can we talk about? Corey Davis looks like he is not fully healthy. Corey Davis didn't really play the second half at all here. So maybe you're just bumping up Elijah Moore, saying, well, if Corey Davis isn't going to be anything, Elijah Moore is now a player we can go through and start every single week. And now our next lesson learned is, I guess we can go over and we can look at that game with the Chicago Bears and the Arizona Cardinals, where Kyler Murray finally coming through with that rushing touchdown equity that we knew he had. This is something we talked about a ton earlier this season when we were saying to sell James Conner based on the idea that James Conner and his rushing efficiency was going to take a dip down based on the fact that Kyler Murray could vulture a couple of those rushing touchdowns away. Now you get Kyler Murray. Yes, not that great of a day. Passing doesn't really matter here. We know Kyler Murray can be a very effective passer, but it simply doesn't matter when you walk away with 59 rushing yards, multiple rushing touchdowns at the same time, 2 passing touchdowns, 123 passing yards. James Conner still that bell cow running back with no Chase Edmonds here. Nothing to really discuss with Arizona. Now, in the case of Chicago, I think maybe you need to be lowering your expectations slightly with Darnell Mooney. Y'all know I have a bet that if Darnell Mooney is a top 15 wide receiver, I actually have to go through and chug a beer out of my shoe on a live stream. Hopefully, Darnell Mooney is not going to be a top 15 wide receiver on a points per game basis. I doubt that he can get there over the next 4 weeks or so. So not going to be too worried about that. Now, he does get 7 targets, but he ties for targets with this team with both Damiere Byrd and Jakeem Grant. And you know who actually leads this team in targets is David Montgomery, getting 9 targets out of the backfield and 21 carries at the same time. So yes, it's a bad matchup on paper. Doesn't freaking matter for David Montgomery, who has 8 receptions, finally giving you that elite game as a receiving running back out of the backfield. And this is why you continuously go through and you just plug and play those running backs. You know we're going to get 80% of their touches in their backfield. It doesn't really matter what else we are going to be finding with that scenario. If you know that running backs can have the volume, you play them despite how they looked as of late. And now let's go over to our next game with the Los Angeles Chargers and the Cincinnati Bengals. Nothing to really say with Los Angeles. Yeah, this is a good team. Like what are we supposed to say with Los Angeles? You're going to go through, you're going to start the usual players. Let's discuss Cincinnati here. Now, with Joe Mixon, the snap data is going to look a little bit weird. He was in and out of this game with an injury, and also this game was blown out in the second half. I don't want to be looking at the snap data too much with Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's still that bell cow running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. But T. Higgins, our guy, are coming out, saving us. After I thought we looked so dumb for including him in a buy low wide receiver video every single week for over a month earlier this season. Back-to-back weeks now with dominant performances. Going through and taking a step up of what he gave us this past week. And what have we been saying with Higgins? You chase the volume. You chase the volume, chase the volume, chase the volume. 14 targets, 9 receptions, 138 receiving yards. The receiving touchdown at the same time. A week before, 8 targets, 114 receiving yards, 6 receptions, and a receiving touchdown. T. Higgins, he's going to continue to rise in our rest of season rankings. We've always had him as a top 24 wide receiver. I've always had him as a player that you're playing every single week, regardless of his matchup. Nothing going to change this next week against the 49ers. And with Ja'Marr Chase, y'all know that. We went from being someone that was saying to sell Ja'Marr Chase when he was getting 200 receiving yards. And over the past month, it seems like I'm wrong in saying to buy low on him every single time, because with Chase, it looks like his roles just changed in this Cincinnati Bengals offense, where he's going to be a little bit more as the field stretching wide receiver here. T. Higgins has had more targets per game than Ja'Marr Chase so far this season. I definitely want to continue to point that out. I think you still have to buy low on Chase. Obviously, your trade deadline is probably already passed. Please, if you have Ja'Marr Chase, I'm not going to be moving Chase down too much in our rest of season rankings. I still think I prefer Ja'Marr Chase over T. Higgins. And keep in mind, I'm the guy who's come out and just been all about Chase for a very, very long time. Okay. So now our next lesson learned will be going over to the Los Angeles Rams and the Jacksonville Jaguars, where James Robinson fumbling at the beginning of the game. Can we not trust James Robinson anymore? With James Robinson, I know that this is a running back also dealing with a multitude of injuries. So is James Robinson a running back now that we can only play if we actually see the production and then we decide to go through and believe it? Because he gets outsnapped by Carlos Hyde this week. As I've said, yes, dealing with injuries and at the same time fumbled at the beginning of the game. Carlos Hyde gets 9 carries compared to James Robinson's 8. And the issue is this offense is just not going to be able to move the ball down the field. So unless you get something changing in Jacksonville, I don't know if we can play James Robinson. Now, in the case of Odell Beckham Jr., it looks like the role here is shrinking a little bit. Now, of course, you can make the argument that maybe this is based on what you actually had with the injury, but still, I think that the lesson learned is what we've been saying the past week. Van Jefferson's the wide receiver 2 in Los Angeles. Not going to be too worried about Odell Beckham Jr. Now, with Odell, of course, you're looking at the fact that this is a wide receiver that, gets the touchdown, so it's not that bad with the production you get at the end of the week. I still think that we want to be expecting that Van Jefferson's going to be the player that you can play, not Odell. Now, let's go over to the Washington football team. A running back, y'all know that we had to get excited about as soon as he had the J.D. McKissic injury. Antonio Gibson. Now with Gibson, it sucks that we say to sell high on him about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then the week after, you get the J.D. McKissic injury, completely changing the role of Antonio Gibson in this Washington football team offense, where I'm not arguing. I'm not that upset because, we have Antonio Gibson on a ton of best ball leagues, and we need that production because he hasn't given it to us all season. Now with Antonio Gibson, 23 carries, 23 carries compared to Wendell Smallwood's 1 and Jarrett Patterson's 1. 55 snaps compared to Wendell Smallwood's 5 and Jarrett Patterson's 4. Antonio Gibson is that bell cow running back. We were talking about the upside that he had coming into the season before you saw the role for J.D. McKissic. Antonio Gibson, he will continue to skyrocket in our rest of season rankings. Antonio Gibson is a top 10 running back easily. That's a given. He's a top 10 running back. Every week you have no J.D. McKissic, and you can possibly move him up a little bit higher than that. And now, a player I hated coming into the season, but I've been screaming to buy low on him over the past month. I think we just have to say, maybe there's a reason we didn't like him coming into the season. Maybe you can't buy low on him because the production's not going to turn around anytime soon. Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is now getting outscored on a points per game basis by Hunter Renfrow. Terry McLaurin down here at wide receiver 25, technically a high end wide receiver 3 on a per game basis so far this season. This past week, 5 targets, 3 receptions, 22 receiving yards. I've been going through and saying to buy him low, but I mean, let's go through and let's ignore the first month of the season, right? Let's look at weeks 5 through 13 and let's go points week by week with his points. 8, 6, 25, 6, 11, 21, 9, and 5. Like, let's remove the first 4 weeks of the season and see through weeks 5 through 13 where Terry McLaurin is on a points per game basis, because I can guarantee you he's going to be pretty far down there. And Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver 36 in that time period. It sucks. I think you still play Terry McLaurin in your flex spot. I don't know exactly what we can be taking away from this, but lower your expectations. And with the Las Vegas Raiders, let's go over to Josh Jacobs, Hunter Renfrow. Josh Jacobs, now a bell cow running back in Las Vegas. Another player we have on so many damn basketball teams. He has to be coming through for us at some point. I mean, with Jacobs, I want to say a big reason that he actually gets this involvement in the receiving game this past week was because of the lack of weapons that you have for Las Vegas. But he plays 50 snaps compared to Kenyon Drake only playing 7. And Josh Jacobs wasn't 100% healthy coming into this week. He gets 13 carries out of this backfield compared to Kenyon Drake's 1. He gets 9 targets as well out of the backfield here. 9 targets for Josh Jacobs. I think you can be very excited about the new role that we have going forward. Let me look at the matchups that we are going to have for Josh Jacobs coming up, because obviously with Jacobs, I mean, it's nice to see that he's getting these targets out of the backfield, but you still kind of prefer him in games that you're assuming that they're going to have no problem moving the ball effectively down the field. And with the Las Vegas Raiders over the next few weeks, they have the Chiefs, don't love it. The Browns, don't love it. The Broncos, don't love it. I guess he has some pretty tough matchups coming up, so that's kind of sucks for us with where we have Josh Jacobs. And also Hunter Renfrow. I mean, this was kind of confirmed. This is what you expected coming into the week. But with no Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow is just going to get every target in Las Vegas. 10 targets this past week. He ran 40 routes, played 54 snaps as well. Play Hunter Renfrow everywhere you can. Now, our next game, honestly, I need to internalize this lesson. Devonta Freeman is here to stay. I probably told... I don't know how many people I told to bench Devonta Freeman this week. And of course, that's embarrassing, because if you're looking at what you had from Freeman this week in particular, looking at where he ranked himself, especially with the involvement that he had as a receiving running back, he was the running back 9 this week. The running back 9 comes out, not only gets 14 carries, but at the same time gets 8 targets out of the backfield. I would imagine that Lamar Jackson, throughout his NFL career, has never targeted a running back 8 times out of the backfield before. Like, I think you have to be drastically raising your expectations with Devonta Freeman going forward. I think that he is a player that you actually can play almost every single week. Like, I don't know what we can do here, because the issue is we are expecting this to be a committee backfield, but it's changed over the past 3 weeks. Latavius Murray, he's not getting that role back. I think Freeman you're playing, and you also cannot trust Rashad Bateman. Looking at snap data, looking at the amount of routes that he ran, I mean, Rashad Bateman, he's also seen his role just completely change in this offense for the Baltimore Ravens, where Bateman only plays 33 snaps out of 74 this week. He plays 33 snaps. Devin Duvernay, Sammy Watkins, and Hollywood Brown all have larger roles than Rashad Bateman. You go through, avoid Bateman where we can. And our last matchup that we have is the 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. And yes, this is confirmed. George Kittle is the number 1 weapon for the 49ers. George Kittle coming out this week in a tight end premium format, dropping 40 damn fantasy points. You've seen this from Kittle every single season of his NFL career. Comes out 12 targets, 9 receptions, 181 receiving yards. There was 2 receiving touchdowns at the same. You start Kittle every single week. Kittle has access at the tight end position to a ceiling that nobody else in fantasy does at all. And then going over to the other offense with the Seattle Seahawks, I think that you're going to have Metcalf continuing to tease us that he is someone that we can go through and consider putting in our starting lineup. I mean, this week in particular, he does come out. He gets 8 targets yet again, 5 receptions, 60 receiving yards. Of course, Tyler Lockett, who we do now have ranked as the wide receiver 1 in Seattle, is, outscoring him. Tyler Lockett was a low-end wide receiver 1 this week with 8 targets, 7 receptions, 68 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. Now, of course, thank you so much for everybody who checked out this video. Please, if you have not done so already, go down there, drop that like on the video. It helps us out so much. Leave a comment. Let me know how stupid I am. Love hearing how dumb I am. Subscribe to the channel. Join the flock. And, of course, I hope to see you in the live stream on Monday night.